Cicci exploring the Enneagram and inner work. I wanted to record a video about the instinctual zones and not so much about the zones as such, because that'll take a while. I do that in my course Understanding the Instincts though. That's a big part of what the course is about. But I will mention some about them, and also I will show some examples of how they can shed really good light on where you're at with the instincts, so to speak. But so first, we have some people saying that, I use all of the instincts. I can't really make out any preferences in self-preservation contexts. I use self-preservation. In social contexts, I use social adaptation. In sexual contexts, etc. So I can't really say that I'm dominant in this or that, or have any, blind spots to speak of. And the first thing to realize about this is that we have all of it. These are hard-coded biological drives, and they're explicitly designed not to be a matter of choice. They're explicitly designed to work as automatic functions, even if we're only semi-conscious, even if we don't care about food. We're going to eat at some point because something in our being will have us do that. So I'm not going to starve on account of having a self-pres blind spot, because sooner or later I'm going to go grab a sandwich, because otherwise I'll die, and the body won't let us do that. But so there's no such thing as actual blind spots, as, this just doesn't exist within me. But there are biases, especially, there are biases between these three, but there are also biases between the zones of each one of them. And that's where it gets a bit complicated, and also very explanatory once you get into the zones. But so in general, what we look at in inner work is like this tip of the iceberg. It's a little bit on top. Underneath the surface, all the rest is working really well. It's just not, we're going to be doing what we're supposed to be doing with our instincts. And that's so for everyone who's, a functioning human being. Otherwise wouldn't we be functioning human beings? So as long as we have that out of the way, we can start zooming in on this little tip of the iceberg thing, which is the really interesting bit in inner work, because this is where our biases lie. This is where our neurological preferences are that we might not even be fully aware of, that has us, that have us steering off into the ditch in various situations. And for this, the zones are really good to incorporate into our learning. So for very short, the zones are for self-preservation. We have a zone of health and well-being, which is obviously about, the body and how I'm doing. But we also have a zone of handling of resources, which might, in a way, it's more of the same, but in another way, it might, we might be so focused on handling our resources and going to work and, that kind of thing, that we neglect to take care of our health. So even within the same drive, there can be contradictory wants and drives, actually. And the third zone in the self-preservation instinct would be what we call the domesticity zone, or home life, which is about our home, where we live, our nest, our den, whichever species we belong to. For the sexual instinct or the attraction instinct, we have a zone for magnetism, which has to do with what we're drawn to, what we're not drawn to, with choosing, discriminating, competing, that kind of thing. We have a zone for exploration or activation, what gets my nervous system up and running, what really captures my attention, that kind of thing. And we also have a zone for merging or fusion, which is, melting into whatever we are interacting with, which must not necessarily be a person. It can be a work of art, or nature, or food, or music, or whatever, or another person. In the social instinct or social adaptation, we have being aware of you as another me, as it were, another kind of entity with, or the same kind of entity, but another entity with their own wishes and opinions and feelings, being aware of that is part of the social instinct. And this is where I'm aware to you know, sense what you're going through, empathy, that kind of thing. So the social instinct starts already with one other person. It's not that we have to be in groups or anything. It's just really being aware of other. In the next zone, it's a bit more zoomed out. We have like networking, bonding, affiliations, ourselves in context with other people, or still with just another person, but it's about relationships and how we manage those. And in the last zone of the social adaptation instinct, it's about participation. And this is really where the groups thing comes in. It's where it's not individuals so much anymore, but rather masses of individuals, of people that I relate to in various ways. But so it's easy to see that somebody, as I said, in this self-preservation instinct, you can have a really strong work ethic, or, you know, really strong caring for your body and not so much for money. And it's like they contradict each other possibly. Social instinct, same thing. Sexual instinct, same thing. So usually it's not so much that we are blind in one instinct, one of the three, one of the drives. It's like I have a social blind spot. For some people that's quite easy to see, and soon we'll be looking at why. But for others it might not be that clear. But when we start looking into the zones, and so we get a sort of a rating of not just 3 buckets of water or whatever, but we get 9 of them, we can realize that, oh, it's a bit more nuanced than just 3 chunks of drives where I'm invested or not. And so I thought we would look at, in conjunction with the Understanding the Instincts course that I'm offering, I'm also offering a session for those who want to look at their own specific zones preferences. And in connection with that session, we have a chart that shows exactly how you rated in these different zones. So if we look at the first person, I picked 3 people. They happened to be a 6, a 3 and a 9. It was not my intention, but they turned out that way. I just wanted to see different types of scorings or charts or whatever. So if we look at the first one, this is how it looks. And you can see that this person, this is actually the 6, you don't have to bother with the text. It's just that they have different, self-preservation is blue, sexual is orange, and social adaptation is green in this chart. And we can see that for this person, if we put it in the staircase order instead, it'll look like this. And it's very simple. It's a person with a dominant sexual instinct and a self-preservation so-called blind spot, and she would have gauged this herself. This is not very complicated. If the chart looks like this, I'm going to have a fairly easy time picking. If I learn basic stuff about the instincts, I'm going to know that this is my dominant one, and this is my not so, not so favored by the ego one, or the so-called blind spot. So this woman probably didn't have a problem telling her instinctual stack, telling the instincts apart from one another in her preference, even before the course. But this explained to her why. And if we look at the next person that I chose, this is a 3, and her chart looks like this. And we can look at it and we can see, okay, self-pres, not so much, but how is this with social and sexual? What does this really mean? What does it look like? And then we put them in order of preference. And suddenly we realize she has a sky-high magnetism zone in the sexual instinct. Really a lot about, advertising your presence and looks and attracting and being attracted and preferring this before that and that kind of thing, competing. But after that, all the zones of social just come one after another. And if we do calculate the score for each drive, we'll find that the social drive actually has more points than, or a higher score than the sexual. Not by a lot, but by a few points, but she also has a really strong magnetism instinct. If we look at it in terms of understanding yourself and where you're coming from and what you can do with these with this knowledge while you have it, and for your inner work, however that's shaped for you, then we can really see that, oh, these are the ones I need to focus on, and obviously these are the ones I need to focus on, and one of the sexual zones is pretty low. It's the third from the bottom, which is strange if she would have been a sexual 3. So it's like, yeah, so we get a keener sense and a more nuanced sense about what's what. And it also gives us the opportunity to cater to this in our inner work in a more specific way, should we want to. And we can look at the last one, the 9. And she came and she said, I did this for ever. I've been looking at the instincts for really, decades. I've been doing the Enneagram and I've been looking at this and I haven't been able to figure it out. I don't resonate with the descriptions of this kind of 9 or that kind of 9, and it's pretty clear to me I'm a 9. It wasn't at first, but now it's clear. So now I've got the instincts bit to to figure out. So she was like, I don't know, but I'm going to do your course and see what happens. And this was really great to be a part of, because what happened was this. This is the chart in each instinct, one after another. And then when we did the preference order chart, it looked like this. So what was clear was that, okay, I'm self-pres last. That wasn't much discussion, and she could see that once she also got closer acquainted with what these self-pres things were. But then she could see that literally every other zone is sexual or social. It's like they take turns, the first 6 places here. So she's sexual on top. She is really a sexual 9. It is her sexual instinct by a few points again that will take the lead over the social. But it's also lots of social in there at the top. And so it's more relevant to her to be looking at her individual zones, seeing that this exploration zone has had me do this, that, and the other in my life and put me in this kind of trouble in my life, possibly, and highly likely. But then I have the reading zone. She can look at that instead of looking at these drives as whole chunks and address them that way, because it doesn't really work for her. And also, when she reads descriptions of 9s and reads about the sexual 9 and the social 9, it's quite clear why she doesn't necessarily resonate with either of them, because they're just so interwoven. So it's more interesting for her to look at the ways these are interwoven than to look at the distinctive drives as such. I hope that this has shed some light on how these zones can really make a difference in how we can work with the instinct and how we can understand ourselves as instinctual creatures. And if you're interested in the course, there are still spaces left for the ones starting in April, so you're very welcome to join us. Thanks for watching.
Get amores, get a copa bella poco. Should I got my ears